Several recent polls have the Conservatives ahead of the Labour Party, including a YouGov survey which suggested the Tories are now 4 points in front. This despite all the infighting, ongoing austerity and the government's handling of Brexit. To tell us where the Labour Party is going wrong, it's the voice of Conservative Britain, Jeff Norcott.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Jeff, you seem pleased.
No, it's brilliant. I'm really enjoying it. Labour are so shit.
Right. I know it's unusual for the party in opposition to be behind at any time, let alone during the sort of current turmoil.
It's weird, isn't it? I mean, Corbyn was massive last year. This year, nothing. He's like fidget spinners, isn't he? He's... or Pokemon Go. There's old Corbachew there. Which does sound strangely Russian, like most of his ideas. I think, you know, ultimately, a lot of the problems come from the Labour membership, you know. They're stuck with Corbyn, the Labour Party, and he knows that. Like all British workers, when they know they cannot be sacked, you kick back a bit, don't you? You sort of phone it in.
Yeah.
He's just sitting there thinking, the membership love me. I don't need to think of any coherent ideas. I'll just sit here and Google recipes for chutney. You know what I mean?
Labour have youth on their side. I mean, we all remember the sort of great youth quake at the last general election.
Yeah, and it turns out that youth quake didn't really happen. Youth vote only went up by 2.5%, so, you know, that's millennials, mate. Couldn't even be asked to turn up to their own statistic.
OK. But the surge in party membership, that can't be ignored.
No, that's their biggest problem, because you only had to be a Labour Party member for 30 seconds and you got to vote for their leader. It's harder to vote on Strictly than it is for Labour leader.
Do you think that their stance on Brexit is helping?
No, I don't think Strictly have a stance on Brexit.
OK, right. Look, any other areas of concern?
Yeah, Labour have also become increasingly identified with, like, identity politics.
Sure.
They had this conference up north, which initially they planned to charge white people more to attend, which is sort of a great way of offending everybody, isn't it? Speaking of which, there's also been a row over the Young Labour Equalities Conference, where if you're a straight, white, able-bodied male, you can't attend.
Yeah.
Who's going to put away the chairs, you know?
I mean, I don't know, Jeff.
I mean, if there's one thing white guys can do, we can put away a chair, Nish.
I mean...
Don't take that away from us.
As a representative of the Asian community, I'll say we'll give it a go. we seem to have done all right with medicine.
Yeah. All right, fair enough, fair enough. But they've also got a problem with the shadow cabinet. I mean, you've got, like, McDonnell, you've got Diane Abbott, Emily Thornberry, all of whom seem like sort of liabilities to much of Middle
Well, Jeff,
England.
you say liabilities. May I remind you that our current Foreign Secretary is Boris Johnson?
Agreed. But the alternative is Emily Thornberry. I mean, she seems like a laugh, but she also seems a couple of bottles of Cava and she could start a missile crisis. It's like one heavy lunch, we could be balls deep in Yemen.
I mean, I'm not sure how that's different from our current policy, but anyway, continue.
You know what? I'll tell you the thing, actually, their biggest problem is, in terms of personality, a lot of people focus on Corbyn. I think it's John McDonnell. Let's have a look at the man himself. Looking scary as ever. He's a shadow chancellor, and some would say a raging communist. You know, he's a shadow chancellor. He doesn't even like money. That's like putting a vegan in charge of the barbecue. Great, everyone's getting grilled red peppers tonight. No lamb chops for anybody. That's how socialism works, basically.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is that really?
Yeah, that is exactly how socialism works.
OK, you can't just say that. You have to back this up. What has he done to make you think that he's some sort of secret revolutionary?
Loads. He stood in front of communist flags at a May Day rally. He was filmed giving a talk at a Marxist training camp. And you know that poster all lefties have of Che Guevara?
Right.
Yeah, his is signed. His safe word is Stalin.
OK. If he's such a radical, why are businesses queuing up to have lunch with him?
Well, basically, CEOs want to know exactly how long they've got before they've got to flee the country, you know? Come on, Nish, if Piers Morgan became Director-General of the BBC, you'd have a little lunch, wouldn't you? Find out where his head's at.
I mean...
Build some bridges.
Yeah, with Piers Morgan, I'm pretty sure I know exactly where his head is at, and,
Very nice.
Look, Jeff, not that you'd want to help them, but do you have any advice on how Labour can get themselves out of this mess?
Well, yeah, I do have a few things. It's number one, just forget about the Northerners, you know? You'll never keep them happy. It's actually impossible. Just cut them adrift and focus on the NutriBullet wankers down south. That would be my advice.
OK, anything else that doesn't somehow manage to offend the entire country?
Yeah, bring back Ed Miliband. That would be the...
OK, so you think he'd do better?
No, I just think it'd be a laugh.
Right. I'm not having this, Jeff. Before you go, I want one constructive piece of advice. That's what you said you'd come here to do. We want one piece of advice.
OK, look, I'd just be honest about who Jeremy Corbyn is. Just say, yes, he does want to leave the EU. And we know he's just an old trot who likes pissing about in the allotment, knitting protest banners and blaming Thatcher because his telly doesn't work.
OK, come on, Jeff. Corbyn at least has captured people who weren't necessarily engaged in politics before. I mean, look at Grime for Corbyn. Look at that as a movement.
No, the youth stuff is bollocks, right? He doesn't know jack shit about grime music, yeah? When they said Stormzy's coming, he said, oh, better get the washing in then.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Norcott!
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Jeffrey?
Nice, mate.
And that, listener, was Jeff Norcott on the MASH Report, a conservative stand-up comic who astoundingly was allowed to be on the BBC. I think it's an absolute outrage that the BBC allows conservatives on their broadcasting programmes. I cannot remember the last time I experienced a conservative on the BBC. And that's the point. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, and welcome to the Booms and Bus Show. It is Monday, the 19th of February. I thought that guy was really funny, and there's another chap, I can't remember his name, Evans or Lewis or something like that, who I'm going to drag out. He's also a conservative stand-up. He was on the Big Questions, and there's a piece on Google that I heard him saying that Trump is the greatest president we've ever seen. And he backs it up, and very convincingly too. Now, the Booms and Bus Show, for new listeners, is about free markets. It's about capitalism. It's about libertarianism. And it's about finding out truly what the socialists, communists, fascists, etc. do to our detriment and highlighting such things. Now, if you don't already receive the Booms and Busts report, which goes alongside what I say on this Booms and Bust Show podcast, then either tweet me at boomsbustshow or send me an email at jd@theboomsandbustshow.com. Beg your pardon, my name's Jonathan Davis, in case I didn't say it earlier. Somehow I've got it in my head I didn't. And there's some really good meaty stuff in the Booms and Bust report. I guarantee you 100% you will never be junk mailed. It doesn't cost you anything. There is no allegation in this indictment that any American was a knowing participant in Russian illegal activity. There is no allegation in this indictment that this conduct altered the outcome of the 2016 election. Rod Rosenstein, Robert Mueller, the investigator's boss. How many tens of millions of dollars and person hours was spent investigating the absolute arrant nonsense of the Russians and Trump colluding, and the Russians having an effect on the November 16 presidential election. And yet we have the CIA involved in every election around the world you can think of. We had Obama, we've got the American citizen George Soros. My God, what a fascist that guy is. You want to check out, Google the 60 Minutes interview and Glenn Beck analysis of George Soros. I tweeted it. It's truly frightening. You've got these guys saying we should not Brexit. Indeed, we should have another referendum. We should stay in the EU and so on. They're deeply involved in our politics. And yet everything goes to the wall because 13 Russians apparently did some trolling on social media. Yes, apparently they spent $100,000 on Facebook. Facebook is a $500 billion company. And they're seriously suggesting to us that $100,000 affects Facebook. The unbelievable CNN and MSNBC, New York Times, and the British press, they reported that 13 Russians had been indicted, and they implied that Trump was involved. They did not report the explicit finding of no collusion. How do they get away with this? Incidentally, listener, I had a problem with the boom that holds my mic in place, so I'm one-handed Jonathan right now, as opposed to normally two-handed, as it were. I feel like I'm Rod Stewart. I'm going to about to start singing "We Are Sailing." No, I was not about to sing "Do You Think I'm..." No, I was not going to. The number of school shootings that have happened around the world since the year 2000. How many do you think in England? The answer is 0. 1 in Greece, the Netherlands, Spain, India, with over 1 billion population, Argentina and Russia. 3 in China. 4 in Mexico. 5 in Australia, Canada, Germany, and South Africa. The number of school shootings that have happened in those countries since 2000. In the United States, 212. Now, the best way to listen to this show, as I've said, and I'll say it again and again, is to go on to the Twitter account, Booms Busts Show. Go onto the pinned tweet, click on the tweet, and then you can of course listen to the show through Audio Boom, which hosts the podcasts. Now, perhaps on a second electronic device, scroll down from that pinned tweet and you'll see photos, charts, etc. The first photo is Andrew Pollack, who himself is wearing a Trump 2020 t-shirt, and he's holding a photo of his daughter, Meadow. At that point, he and his wife, I believe, were searching for Meadow. The day after, he tweeted, "She's gone." Socialists, aka fascists, aka Democrats in America, his own country people, tweeted the following. "The irony of this picture is almost laughable," said one. "He's pro-Trump, which means he supports the guy who is responsible for the death of his child." "I don't feel sorry for him," says another, and Trump. And finally, "Maybe should have thought twice before voting for #terrorist Trump." There are no words. Listener, this is how a socialist thinks, and this is the least of what a socialist does. I'm, of course, talking about the Parkland, Florida shooting by the 18-year-old madman. The Associated Press, of course, a lefty news organisation, at 11:50 a.m. on the 15th of February, tweeted, "Breaking, leader of white nationalist group has confirmed suspect in Florida school shooting was member of his organisation. It got 41,000 retweets and 50,000 likes. At 7:38 p.m. the following evening, the Associated Press tweeted, "White nationalist appears to have lied to the AP, other news outlets, when he claimed that Florida school shooting suspect was a member of his group." Do you not think you should have got the gen on him before tweeting? That tweet, incidentally, got 3,400 retweets and 3,400 likes. You know, the National Rifle Association is basically the manufacturers of handguns and rifles, etc., in the United States. And it's an abominable organisation. It's an abominable industry. I mean, to be able to make guns and sell it to people on the streets, it just doesn't. I have no words how disgusting it is. And they keep coming out with me, and I'm a libertarian, and you know, I'm an idiot that I don't get the Second Amendment right to bear arms. Well, there's a right to do lots of things, but that doesn't make it right. I'd rather my children were safe. Wouldn't you? And, you know, I have argument all the time at Boom's Bus Show on Twitter with out-and-out libertarians who call me, who believe, you know, they basically call me a lefty. Yeah, it's laughable. Exactly, it's laughable. Because I argue against the right to bear arms, and I argue against capital punishment. I argue against the right to bear arms because it's obvious it doesn't happen anywhere else, even remotely close to how it happens in the US. Thus, it's not the videos, it's not the electronic games, it's not the movies, it's not Hollywood. It's the fact that they can get guns. Ban the blooming guns. Stop the manufacturers from being able to sell them to retail customers. Except under the strictest of licenses, such as you go out deer hunting or something like that, and you have to pass stringent tests like you do in the UK, and you have to renew your license every single year, and you have to keep it in a locked up safe, and so on and so on. The idea, what is it I saw? Oh yeah, the Portland gunman. What was the idiot's name? Nicholas Cruz. He was too young to buy beer. He was expelled from that school for violence. Oh yeah. He got mental health treatment. He was reported to the FBI for boasting he'd shoot up a school on YouTube in his own name. And as anyone who knows anything about this story knows, that the FBI didn't investigate. And as of the 13th of February 2018, he owned an assault rifle that he obtained entirely legally. It's madness. And although the NRA is a disgusting organisation, and, you know, between 1998 and 2017, it spent $200 million. Wow, $200 million. That's practically $20 million a year on political activities, schmoozing with these senators and congressmen. Wow, $20 million a year. The United States trades unions spent $1.7 billion on politics in the 2016 election alone. I want listener you to remember that people in Guantanamo have been kept by the US in cages thousands of miles from their home for a decade and a half with no charges, no due process of any kind, and no end in sight under 3 different presidents. At one point, it included a journalist. Now, without a shadow of a doubt, many of them will be the most brutal terrorists who ever walked on the face of the earth. But not all of them. And in any case, just because they're terrorists, they are entitled to be tried under the law, not lawless. Now, on This Week in History, in 1907, Lenin, Stalin, and Trotsky met in a Hackney church. Hackney, for non-Brits, is in the east of the city of London. They met for the 5th Congress and debated whether to plan for revolution in Russia. The unmarked site of that debate is now a block of flats, of apartments, next to a Tesco Express. Tesco's like Walmart or something like that. Described by the developer as, quote, luxury duplex apartments, unquote. Kill irony. And Leninism, Trotskyism, Stalinism was rife right across the world in the 20th century, and those brutal dictators murdered 120 million human beings. I'm talking also about the Nazis and Pol Pot and Chairman Mao and the Latin Americans and so on. On the 16th of February, 1977, 70 years later after that meeting of those communist, brutal, disgusting men, Dietmar Schweitzer was 18 years old. He was an East German radio technician, and he triggered a hidden alarm while attempting to cross the border from east to west. Guards in 2 nearby watchtowers opened fire, and 10 meters, so 10 feet short of the last fence, Dietmar fell dead, hit by 3 bullets. The soldiers hastily dragged his body into a ditch before Western observers could take a photo. I'm showing you his photo to remember Dietmar Schweitzer, who died on This Week in History because of men like Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin, Corbyn, MacDonald, women like Abbott, Chavez, Maduro, Kim Jong-un, and so on. I mentioned the Labour people there. On Saturday, the election of the new Labour National Policy Forum chairperson was cancelled at the last minute. It was believed that Momentum, which, if you don't know, is the reincarnation of Lenin. They feared that Anne Black, who was ousted as the National Executive Committee Disciplinary Panel chairman last month, Momentum feared that Anne Black was going to win the National Policy Forum chairmanship. So they cancelled the election. Are you getting it yet? Talking about irrelevant parties. The UK Irrelevance Party, extraordinary general meeting, sacked Henry Bolton as leader of itself. He lost the vote in Birmingham, 63% to 37%. And the interim leader appointed by their National Executive Committee was Gerard Batten, MEP. And as it happens, I watched a video of him, a YouTube of him on Sky News yesterday. He actually did a pretty good job on the interview. I was actually impressed, I have to say. But I've said it 100 times, I'll say it another 100 times. Until and unless UKIP or Anne-Marie Waters' For Britain party becomes free market capitalist, they will both be entirely irrelevant. So we've had Oxfam, and then we've got to look at the international charity that David Miliband, the Labour guy, has been chief executive. He earns about £500,000 a year, tax-free, running this charity. The UK government has been giving it £92 million a year. This charity, what the heck's the name of it? Oh yeah, the International Rescue Committee. FAB, David. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thunderbirds are go. One of my favourite programmes of all time. Anyway, the International Rescue Committee has been accused of covering up fraud, sexual abuse and bribery. And apparently that £92 million is within the foreign aid gravy train. I thought it was given to governments. Just shows you how naive I am. Which brings me, from one charity to it brings me, let's face it, we've got to talk about Brendan Cox. Saint Brendan. He's resigned from the Joe Cox Foundation that he founded. He's admitted to multiple violent sexual assaults on different women. When he was, get this, Director for Women's Empowerment at Save the Children. I'm hearing all over the show that in the charities, in Whitehall, in the media, they all knew about Brendan Cox for years, but they did and said nothing. Now, who do you think said this on the 28th of January 2017 on a tweet? The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men and women to do and say nothing. Brendan Cox. Joe and Brendan met whilst they were both working for Oxfam. You notice I'm giving quite a lot of pauses today because I just want it to all sink in how absolutely disgusting so many things are. Lucy Powell MP, she tweeted that because he's admitted to it and he's apologised for it, it's forgivable. Of course, when Toby Young had tweeted 5 years previously, Toby's of course a Conservative, about a woman's breasts. He tweeted about a woman's breasts, not a particular woman, any woman's breasts. He didn't violently attack any woman. He, of course, was hounded by Lucy M. Powell. That's her Twitter account. And Toby Young resigned from what he was doing on free speech. The BBC, the newspapers, they've played down Corbyn's treachery and Brendan Cox's removal from his charities. And yet, of course, when the Conservative Defence Secretary was hounded out of his job because he touched a woman's knee, Rachel Saunders tweeted, "I'm glad at Mr. Brendan Cox has reflected on his past actions. Please know, if you haven't met him but admired his ethics and beliefs since Joe died, you were right to do so. He had committed his life to trying to make the world a better place. Everyone gets it wrong at times." Brendan Cox violently sexually assaulted women. Rachel Saunders, on her Twitter account, calls herself a feminist. She is in charge of child services in Sandwell Council. Quote, "Everyone gets it wrong at times." Unquote. Trump talked about grabbing them by the pussy. Brendan Cox grabbed them by the throat and banged them against the wall. One is a scumbag and not allowed in the UK, according to lefties. The other is a paragon of virtue. Talking about lefties and socialism, the 10 poorest cities in America are New York, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, El Paso, St. Louis, Miami, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Buffalo, and Detroit. New York, number 10, 24% of the population are below the poverty level. In Detroit, number 1, 32% of the population are below the poverty level, practically 1 in 3. None of them has had a Republican mayor for nearly 30 years. Obama's final arms export tally was more than double that of George W. Bush. Barack Obama was handed a Nobel Peace Prize by the Scandinavian socialists. Che Guevara, one of the most revered socialists of the 20th century. And of course, you're not a true student drinking and shagging your way through uni without a Che Guevara t-shirt. Che Guevara, of course, was a sadistic mass-murdering communist. He dedicated his life to fighting capitalism and free speech. He is now nothing more than a piece of merchandise. Capitalism always wins in the end. I want to thank Andy Caldwell for bringing that to my attention. Now, as a public service announcer, here is my public service announcement. 10 things that require zero talent but will actually be helpful. 1. Be on time. 2. Have a strong work ethic. 3. Put effort in. 4. Your body language. 57% of communication is not what you say. 5. Energy. 6. Attitude. 7. Passion. 8. Being coachable, which is the reason why I'm unemployable. 9. Doing extra. And 10. Being prepared. If you're trying to build your professionalism or your career, listen to that again and again. Rightmove, I've said before, is the most well-known and by far the biggest online estate agent portal in the United Kingdom. asking prices year on year are down 1%. All the housing bears are saying, no, they're shouting, this is it. House prices are crashing. We said it was going to happen. Well, it could be. The thing is, governments have many weapons in their armories. Who'd ever heard of Help to Buy before it came out? There's not much they can do now, admittedly, other than socialise housing, which, of course, they started to do with Help to Buy. They could socialise the entire housing stock. They could raise Help to Buy to 100% and cut out the banks and building societies. They could lend directly. This, of course, is communism. Well, that's what Help to Buy is. It's communism. Let's see global interest rates rise first for a few years, as I've been talking about in recent shows. Then we'll see what governments will do. When's the next election? It'll be 2022. Let's see what the government does in 2020. Because remember, they brought out Help to Buy in 2013, 2 years in advance of the 2015 election. Okay. Well, the markets seem to believe that there's something afoot, because I'm showing a couple of charts there. Look on Boom's Bus Show. You've got Countrywide, which is by far the biggest estate agent in the country. And you've got Foxtons, which is a very large estate agent surrounding London. They've got about 50 branches. Countrywide's share price is down from 600 pence in the spring of 2015. Today, 80 pence. Wow. Foxtons at the peak in February, also in the spring of 15. So, there's clearly something about the market, and they peaked together, and so Foxtons peaked at about 280 pence. Now, 75 pence. So, what does the market know is going to come to the housing market? I've been saying for ages, house prices have probably peaked for a generation. Well, we'll see. Dominic Lawson has written a piece for the Daily Mail. He says, I greatly admire the 41 academics who've come out for Brexit, but they'll need thick skins and courage. I want to read some of what he's written. If I had more time, I would read the whole thing. A group of leading academics and ex-academics across a range of disciplines has launched a website called Briefings for Brexit. It is led by two notable members of Cambridge University, the economist Dr. Graham Gudgeon and the historian Professor Robert Toombs, whose 1,000-page epic, The English and Their History, was published in 2014 to near universal acclaim. Blah, blah, blah. I want to get down to the bit where, a 21-year-old undergraduate in London called Tori, Torri, who we see carrying a volume called How Parliament Works, tells how she is regularly called Brexit bitch, and that she has heard another student leaving a lecture she attended saying to her friend, I just want to punch that Brexit bitch. Cambridge professor Chris Bickerton, author of the European Union A Citizen's Guide, wrote last year, in my academic field of European studies, being critical of the EU is rather like being a climate change scientist who admits he has an SUV in the garage. Bickerton, another left-wing Brexiteer, well, he's obviously an idiot, therefore. How can you possibly imagine that leaving the EU is going to make it all right if we turn socialist? Bickerton was tolerated during the referendum campaign, but when his side actually won, quote, tolerance gave way to anger and disbelief. And he added about colleagues in his university and others who have reacted in this way, quote, "This intolerance over Brexit is rooted in a lack of empathy or interest in the lives of others, especially those outside one's social circle and lower down the ladder of income and education. Rather than engage in an argument or inquire into someone's reasons, one dismisses them as racists. Fear, that is, on the part of academics and students who endure ostracism, and worse, if they express open support for what it is, after all, the policy of both Conservative and Labour at last year's general election. I was surprised not to see Bickerton's name amongst those initial academics who have signed up to the initiative launched today. But perhaps, says the author, Dominic Lawson, perhaps I should not have been. Who knows what pressure he's been under." Now, there's another story I want to find. Yeah, that shy Brexit supporting professor I mentioned earlier told me, after the graduation ceremony in 2016, the master of my college told all new graduates how they should vote in the referendum. The hostility of the higher educational establishment to Brexit is itself a form of agency capture. As Toombs observes, the university get a lot of money from EU funds. So many of our colleagues had wrongly taken a corporatist, selfish and narrow view, as if we didn't know. As Lawson finishes off, I wish them the best of luck, but above all, they will need courage and thick skins. Dr. Henry Kissinger sardonically remarked that academic political disputes are the most vicious of all, quote, because the stakes are so small, unquote. Not this time, says Lawson. In Germany, the AfD, I think it's Alternative for Deutschland, in 1998 in the polls, AfD scored 0%, whereas the lefty SPD was at 46%. By 2008, the AfD was at a massive 1%. The lefty SPD was at 33%. In 2018, the AfD is at 16%, and the lefty SPD is down to 16%. That's from the polls from INSA and YouGov. Go AfD. Now, you've seen that the new Marvel movie is Black Panther. Black Lives Matter have said if you don't like it, you're clearly a racist. The only two white actors in Black Panther are Martin Freeman, who played Bilbo Baggins in Tolkien's The Hobbit, and Andy Serkis, who was absolutely amazing as Ian Dury in the film of Ian Dury. He played Gollum in The Hobbit, and these two guys obviously are the Tolkien white guys. I'm not going to tell you the colour of Thomas Sowell's skin, this amazing philosopher in the US who's still with us in his late 80s. One of my absolute heroes of all time, because his skin is irrelevant. This is what he said, quote, "Blacks were not enslaved because they were black, but because they were available. Slavery has existed in the world for thousands of years. Whites enslaved other whites in Europe for centuries before the first black was brought to the Western Hemisphere. Asians enslaved Europeans, Asians enslaved other Asians, Africans enslaved other Africans, and indeed even today, in North Africa, blacks continue to enslave blacks." The media tells us that the police are recommending that Prime Minister Netanyahu should be indicted on corruption charges, including bribery. In what other Middle Eastern country could that even be possible? For this reason, and 1,001 others, these are the reasons why Israel's existence must be defended. Moving on to economics in the last 15 minutes of the show. Household debt in the US as a percent of consumer spending has risen from 40% in 2013 to 100% in 2017. So households borrowed $525 billion last year, and consumers spent $530 billion. Of course, we know it won't end well, but I'm just letting you know. Japan's exports year on year rose 12.2%. Its imports rose 7.9%. Not recessionary, folks. The futures markets, as of Friday, are now pricing in a 100% chance, so that's a pretty good chance, isn't it, of a March Fed rate hike, taking the US up to 1.5%. And it's very likely that in March or April, or no doubt Carnage, as I call him, will keep it for as long as he can. But there's no question the Bank of England will be raising once or twice this year. US CPI, consumer price inflation, rose from 1.9% to 2.1% for the year. Inflation's rising, listener. So, you know, everything I've been saying is happening. It's happening. Today in market history, in 2002, that's the 15th of February, PayPal came to the market at, it started at $13. It closed the day at $20. Goodness knows how many hundreds of dollars or whatever it is now. But this is very, very interesting. Its chief executive officer was Peter Thiel, multi-billionaire, who has basically ousted himself from San Francisco because as a conservative, as a prime supporter of Trump in the election, he can no longer stay in San Francisco. This guy's a multi-billionaire, and they pushed him out. Who else was on the board of PayPal? You had Reid Hoffman, who went on to be a multi-billionaire, having set up LinkedIn. And another rather famous face, although there's others there. You can have a look at it yourself. A chap with a very strange sounding name. What's that? Elon Musk. Fascinating, isn't it? So you think the media doesn't manipulate you, eh? Look at the two photos of the Wall Street Journal the same day. The headline on one, which had been sent to the heartland of the Republicans. The headline was Trump softens his tone. Sorry, that one went to Washington, to New York, and so on. In other words, Trump's giving in. And the Wall Street Journal, the same paper, went to the Trump heartland. It said, Trump talks tough on wall, as in the wall with Mexico. Well, you know, what a load of nonsense. The point is, the media isn't there to educate. I've told you this 100 times. The media is there to sell bums on seats, newspapers, advertising, etc. Literally, I never read newspapers now. I literally never watch or listen to the mainstream media news. I just literally never do. That great lefty 100 millionaire of our time, Bono, who, he's just partnered with Monsanto, which the Greenies say is the devil company in disguise. And he's going to put genetically modified seeds into Africa. Bono is going to make a fortune out of that. Did I mention it was Bono? I just happened to notice how big Amazon is. Never mind its market cap and whatever. Do you know how many people work for Amazon globally? Guess. Well, I'll tell you. It's 566,000 people. And it's still growing. Apparently Facebook on the iOS, the Apple operating system, has for mobile devices, has a new link in the menu called Protect. Clicking it takes you to a page that installs literally spyware on your iPhone. I'm going to spend a little bit of time looking at gold. I've been banging the drum, particularly on Twitter and recently on the show, that as gold got above 1,300, 1,310 an ounce, I'm resolutely a bull for gold. As you know, through 2017, I was very neutral on it because it was going up and down, up and down. It wasn't going anywhere. But look at the charts. Oh my God. First of all, you've got, what's that, about a 16-year chart of gold relative to government bonds. And it has yet again broken up out of a major multi-year resistance. And so long as it stays above that, no reason why it won't, you're looking at a bull market. A bull market of gold against government bonds. In other words, the safe haven when it hits the fan for stocks is now gold, not government bonds. The next chart is gold against stocks. And although it had a little peak down below multi-year support, it's heading back up again. It will, support turns into resistance. It is very soon about to take out that support. I was right the first time. It's very soon about to take out that resistance. I'm telling you, gold is in a bull market against government bonds and against stocks. What else do you want it to be in a bull market against? The next chart is just incredible. It's 20 years of gold mining shares relative to gold. And you see that by the end of 2015, gold mining shares were even cheaper against gold than at the bottom of a 20-year bear market at the end of 2000. Incredible. That's how cheap gold miners are. And by the way, gold at the end of 2015 was $1,050 an ounce. At the end of 2000, gold was $300 an ounce. Gold miners against gold has been a downtrend since 2005. I'm telling you, it's going to break that downtrend. Look at the chart. It's as clear as daylight. It's going to break that downtrend. It's going to go up into the high 0.15s or to 0.2. It's in a multi-year bull market. And go and help your retirement, folks. Talking of which, there's a beautiful chart of uranium for 50 years. I mean, that's a lot of data. You can see two massive bull markets there, and you can see two massive bear markets. What comes after a bear market? Well, you know, am I saying that uranium and uranium miners are going to go into a massive bull market this year? I don't know. Next year? I don't know. But I've said before and I'll say it again. I'm looking at 1,000 to 2,000% on uranium mining funds over the next 5 to 10 years. Yes, I did say 1,000 to 2,000%. On verra. So we're nearly at the end. I've got a few quotes I want to go through with you. I hope you've enjoyed the show. If you're not following me on Twitter, please do so at Booms Busts Show. Thank you again to the 28 of you who were good enough to retweet the show. Let's see if we can get 30 this week for show number 44. It literally takes a second to retweet. Why would you not do it? I really want to see a higher percentage of downloaders retweeting the show. Why are you not on Twitter? Why are you not following on Twitter the Booms Bust Show account if you're on Twitter anyway? There's a lot going on the Twitter account. I've mentioned about the Booms and Busts report, and if you just want much more markets stuff, there's some market stuff at Booms Bust Show. If you want much more market stuff, you're welcome to it on my personal Twitter account, Jonathan Davis, where the O is a 0. Marcus Aurelius said this over 3,000 years ago. It could have been said yesterday. It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people. But we care more about their opinion than our own. Couldn't agree more, Marcus. Listener, listen to yourself. You know what you need more than other people know. One of the scapegoats for the greed in the early 2000s was billionaire Leona Helmsley. She was taken to court for tax evasion. You know, this is how they get you if they decide they don't like you. You know, just like Al Capone. And she said, as many of you will recall, in court, we don't pay taxes. Only the little people pay taxes. And actually, she was telling the truth. And, you know, following on from the gold charts, the gold miners, the uranium miners, they are absolutely relevant to what Warren Buffett said. And Greece as well. I notice I think it was Moody's, one of the big 3 American ratings agencies, who incidentally gave AAA ratings to Greece and Ireland and the Irish banks and AIG and so on prior to the biggest bust in history. Greece has just been upgraded from B- to B. I don't know why you're not buying Greece while it's still dirt cheap. Uranium miners, gold miners, what are you waiting for? Warren Buffett, the stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. I'm not giving advice, I'm giving you ideas. But if you do buy these things after you've analysed them, you've done your due diligence, just be patient. Last one, from Walter E. Williams. Practically the whole point of this show. No amount of IMF, World Bank and other handout interventions can bring prosperity to repressive nations. Listener, thanks for being there. I've had a blast. I'll see you next week.